What if you woke up one morning and your entire city was gone? Not destroyed, not flooded, just empty. No cars, no voices, no children running in the streets. Just wind moving through broken windows and the echo of a life that used to be. That is the reality of America's ghost towns, and what most people don't realize is that these weren't tiny villages in the middle of nowhere. These were real cities. Cities with banks, with schools, with opera houses and grand hotels. Cities where thousands of people built their dreams. And then, one by one, those dreams collapsed. Today, we're counting down the 10 American ghost towns that were once thriving cities, and the haunting stories behind their fall. You will not believe what some of these places used to look like. Let's get into it. 10. Coming in at number 10, Bodie, California. Perched at over 8,000 feet in the eastern Sierra Nevada, Bodie was once one of the most violent, lawless, and prosperous gold mining towns in the American West. At its peak in 1879, Bodie had a population of nearly 10,000 people. It had 65 saloons, 65. It had a red light district, a Chinatown, a daily newspaper, and more gambling halls than churches. One local preacher described it as, quote, a sea of sin, lashed by the tempests of lust and passion. Today, Bodie is a California state historic park, frozen in a state of what officials call arrested decay. Nothing is restored. Nothing is rebuilt. What you see is exactly what was left behind when the last residents walked out the door. A child's shoe still sits in a bedroom. Bottles of whiskey still line the shelves of empty saloons. Bodie doesn't just look like a ghost town, it feels like one. 9. Coming in at number 9, Centralia, Pennsylvania. This one is different, because Centralia didn't just empty out, it became uninhabitable. In 1962, a coal seam beneath the town caught fire, and that fire has been burning ever since. For over 60 years, an underground inferno has been consuming the earth beneath Centralia, releasing toxic gases, causing sinkholes to open without warning, and making the ground itself dangerously unstable. At its height, Centralia was home to more than 2,700 people. It had churches, a post office, a thriving main street. By 2020, the official population was 5 people. The government bought out most residents in the 1980s and eventually condemned the town. Most structures have been demolished. The streets still exist, cracked, buckled, with steam rising from fissures in the pavement. It looks like something straight out of a horror movie. And if you've seen the film Silent Hill, yes, Centralia was the direct inspiration. The fire, by the way, scientists estimate it could keep burning for another 250 years. 8. Coming in at number 8, Jerome, Arizona. If you've ever heard the phrase a mile-high city, you might think of Denver. But long before Denver earned that nickname, Jerome, Arizona was wearing it, literally built into the side of Cleopatra Hill at 5,000 feet of elevation. At its boom, Jerome was home to 15,000 residents and was one of the largest copper mining operations in the entire United States. It generated over $1 billion in ore, and that's in early 20th century money. It had a thriving downtown, luxury hotels, and a reputation as the wickedest town in the West. When the copper ran out in 1953, the population collapsed almost overnight. Within years, it had fallen to fewer than 100 people. Here's where Jerome's story takes a strange turn, though. Some buildings, destabilized by the mining and dynamite blasting, actually slid down the hill. The old traveling jail, a concrete structure, moved over 225 feet from its original location. You can still see it today, sitting crooked in the hillside like the town itself is trying to forget it was ever there. 7. Coming in at number 7, Cahokia, Alabama. Most people have never heard of Cahokia, but for a brief glorious moment in the early 1800s, it was the first permanent capital of the state of Alabama. Founded in 1819 at the confluence of the Cahokia and Alabama rivers, the city was meant to be a great southern capital. It had a state capitol building, grand plantation homes, newspapers, and real political power. Then the flooding started. The rivers that made Cahokia strategically important also made it miserable to live in. Repeated floods devastated the town, and in 1826, the capital was moved to Tuscaloosa. Cahokia tried to survive as a regular city, and for a while it did, growing to nearly 3,000 people by the 1850s. But the Civil War, economic collapse, and more catastrophic flooding finally broke it. By the 1870s, residents had simply given up and left. Today, Cahokia is an archaeological site managed by the Alabama Historical Commission. Ruins of columns still stand in the woods. When the river floods, which it still does, the old town site goes completely underwater, just as it always did. The river always wins. For 6. Coming in at number 6, Kennecott, Alaska. To get to Kennecott, you have to really want to be there. It sits deep in the Wrangell-St. Elias National Park in Alaska, one of the most remote regions on the continent. There are no paved roads leading in. The last stretch requires crossing a river on a footbridge. And yet, between 1903 and 1938, Kennecott was one of the most productive copper mining operations on the planet. The Kennecott mines extracted over 4.6 million tons of ore from the surrounding mountains, worth billions in today's dollars. At its peak, the operation employed hundreds of workers who lived in a company town complete with a hospital, a school, a tennis court, and even a recreation hall with a bowling alley. When copper prices collapsed and the richest ore veins ran dry in 1938, the company shut everything down virtually overnight. Workers were told to pack only what they could carry. Everything else, furniture, equipment, food still on shelves, was left behind. Today, the red wooden buildings of Kennecott still stand against the Alaskan wilderness, weathered but upright. The National Park Service has been slowly stabilizing them for decades. It is one of the most strikingly beautiful and eerily preserved ghost towns in America. We are halfway through our countdown, and the stories are only getting more dramatic. The towns you've seen so far fell because of flooding, fire, and the collapse of single industries. But the 5 cities ahead? Their stories involve betrayal, environmental disaster, and in one case, a decision made in Washington, D.C. that erased a community virtually overnight. Don't go anywhere. Number 5. Coming in at number 5, Thurmond, West Virginia. At the turn of the 20th century, Thurmond was the coal capital of the New River Gorge. Trains ran through it day and night. Its bank handled more money annually than the city of Richmond, Virginia. It had no churches and no jail, because, as locals like to say, nobody stayed sober long enough to need either. At its peak, Thurmond processed millions of tons of coal and welcomed thousands of travelers through its famous depot every year. Today, the official population of Thurmond, West Virginia is 5 people. The train still runs through. An Amtrak line passes once a day in each direction. Sometimes passengers wave from the windows at the handful of residents who remain. The depot has been restored as a National Park Visitors Center. The rest of the town stands silent, reclaimed slowly by the forest pressing in from all sides. Number 4. Coming in at number 4, Gilman, Colorado. Gilman sits on a cliff, literally, perched on the edge of Battle Mountain above the Eagle River Canyon. It was once a zinc and lead mining powerhouse in the Colorado Rockies. At its height in the mid-20th century, Gilman was a fully functioning company town with around 1,000 residents, housing, stores, a school, everything provided and owned by the mining company. But in 1984, the EPA declared the entire town a Superfund site, one of the most contaminated pieces of land in the United States. Mining runoff had poisoned the soil and the river below for decades. Residents were ordered out. The town was fenced off. You cannot enter Gilman today. You can only see it from the highway, a cluster of weathered buildings hanging improbably on the cliff edge, sealed behind chain-link fencing, slowly deteriorating above the canyon. It is not abandoned by choice. It is quarantined. Number 3. Coming in at number 3, Rhyolite, Nevada. Few ghost towns rose as fast or fell as hard as Rhyolite. In 1904, a gold strike in the Nevada desert triggered one of the last great American gold rushes. Within just 2 years, Rhyolite had grown to a population of somewhere between 8,000 and 12,000 people. Streets were graded, a stock exchange opened, electric lights came on. A train station was built. A 3-story bank of stone and steel went up in the middle of the desert. Rhyolite had all the confidence of a city built to last forever. It lasted 8 years. By 1912, the gold was gone, the banks had collapsed, accelerated by the financial panic of 1907, and the population had evaporated. The stone bank still stands today, its grand facade crumbling under the Nevada sun. A famous house built from 51,000 glass bottles still exists. And across the desert landscape, ruins of homes and storefronts lie scattered like the bones of something that burned too bright, too fast. Just 2. Coming in at number 2, Picher, Oklahoma. Of all the towns on this list, Picher may have the most heartbreaking story. For decades, Picher was the single most productive lead and zinc mining region in the entire world. During World War I and World War II, the mines of Picher supplied the metal for bullets and shell casings that armed American soldiers across 2 global conflicts. The town swelled to nearly 20,000 residents at its peak, but beneath the surface, literally, something terrible was happening. Decades of unregulated mining had left the ground riddled with tunnels, creating a catastrophic risk of sinkholes opening without warning. The mountains of mining waste, called chat piles, contaminated the groundwater and soil with toxic levels of lead. Children in Picher showed blood lead levels far exceeding federal safety limits. In 2006, the entire town was designated a Superfund site. The federal government began buying out residents and urging evacuation. Then in 2008, a devastating tornado tore through what remained, destroying dozens of structures and killing several people. Today, Picher is essentially gone. The chat piles still loom over the landscape. The contamination remains. A water tower with the town's name still stands, rusting slowly, watching over nothing. Bunner 1. Coming in at number 1, Cahokia Mounds, Illinois, and the city that time forgot. Most Americans know almost nothing about this place, and that, perhaps, is the most haunting thing about it. Because before Columbus, before any European ever set foot on North American soil, before the United States was even a concept, there was a city right here, on the banks of the Mississippi River, just across from where St. Louis stands today. At its peak around 1100 AD, this city was home to an estimated 10,000 to 20,000 people, making it one of the largest cities in the world at that time. Larger than London, larger than Paris. It had massive earthen mounds, over 120 of them, carefully constructed, precisely aligned. The largest, Monk's Mound, covers more ground at its base than the Great Pyramid of Giza. And then, sometime in the 1300s, the city was abandoned. We don't know why. Drought, disease, political collapse, resource depletion. The answers remain buried. No one even knows what the people called themselves or what they called their city. Cahokia is a name given by a completely different tribe who arrived centuries later. An entire civilization, thriving, complex, monumental, vanished from the earth. And most Americans have never heard of it. That is the number 1 ghost town in America, not because it's the most dramatic ruin, but because it represents the deepest erasure of a people, a culture, and a city that deserve to be remembered. From the frozen streets of Bodie to the poisoned earth of Picher, from the clifftop ruins of Gilman to the 1,000-year silence of Cahokia, Every ghost town in America tells the same story underneath. People came. People built. People believed this place would last forever. And then it didn't. Some fell to the exhaustion of the earth beneath them. Some fell to floods, fires, and toxic legacy. Some were erased by decisions made in boardrooms and government offices far away. But all of them stand as a reminder that nothing is guaranteed. Not prosperity, not permanence, not even memory. Which of these stories hit you hardest? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, smash that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the places, people, and stories that shaped America. We post every week, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Until then, stay curious.